Well, hello. Thank you, one and all, for finding a window of time to join us while we take part in this experience of growth and insight into Naropa University. I hope everyone has some tea ready, maybe some water, your favorite beverage, or anything alongside you as we embark upon this journey. I like to think of today's event as sort of a Naropa buffet. We're going to have the chance to hear from Naropa leaders, our appetizer, expand our understanding through a sample class, our main course, and join a broad array of breakout rooms after this session, or our dessert. But first, just a little bit about our community. Founded in 1974 by Chogyam Trungpa Rinpoche, Naropa is the first accredited university to bring contemplative education to the West. Because at Naropa, mindfulness practice is truly at the center of everything that we do. We truly believe that changing the world, it starts within. And whether you're going for a master's, your bachelor's, a certificate program, or anything in between, academic life at Naropa is complemented by both self-reflection and learning to be mindful. One aspect of contemplative practice that is near and dear to our hearts is the Naropa bow. It represents something unique to every community member, and I'm hoping to start our experience today with that Naropa bow. With everything at Naropa, if you don't feel or find value in something or feel comfortable taking part in it, feel free to watch and observe. But if you're out there and you'd like to maybe take your first Naropa bow, I encourage and invite you to take part with me. And as I said, this is not the one and only way to do the Naropa bow. Many Naropa community members find their own intention in this practice. So just my version of it. As I start my Naropa bow, I always begin by closing my eyes, take countless deep breaths throughout the practice, and I start by getting a nice flat base and connect back to the earth. For me, my Naropa bow is a three-step process. First, I start with a mental check-in. Take a moment to explore how I'm feeling at the moment. If I'm feeling stressed, if I'm feeling overwhelmed, take a moment to acknowledge where those feelings might be coming from. For me, my second step is more of a physical check-in. If I'm feeling stressed or overwhelmed, are those feelings manifesting anywhere physically for me in my body? For me, I feel it start to build up in my forehead, my lower back a little bit. Take a moment to be aware. And then I switch to more of a transitionary practice. With those first two steps in mind, can I use any of those findings to prepare better for my next step in the day? Take a moment to acknowledge that. When you feel centered, when you feel ready, a simple bow at the waist. Well, thank you for taking part in that. Maybe your first Naropa bow, maybe your 100th. Hopefully not the last, though. Earlier, we spoke a little bit about Chogyam Trungpa Rinpoche, our founder and leader of yesteryear, but now it brings me immense joy to introduce our current leader, President Chuck Leaf. President since 2012, his impact on Naropa began long before that. President Leaf participated in some of the earliest discussions that worked to create Naropa University, and he's been an active member of the community since our creation in 1974, acting as a lawyer and as a founding member of the Board of Trustees. Now, following a 28-year career as a social entrepreneur, developing housing, healthcare clinics, early childhood education centers, and businesses, all in the service of homelessness, low-income people, and communities, Chuck returned to Boulder and Naropa. He and his wife, the Buddhist teacher and writer Judy Leaf, who led Naropa from 1980 and 1985, are the parents of two daughters, both of who are Naropa graduates. Thank you for spending time with us today, President Leaf.
Thanks, Peter, and good afternoon, everybody. Thanks for taking some time to join us at Naropa. It's an exciting time right now for us. I actually just recorded a reading for the orientation that we're going to hold in a couple of weeks for new students that are entering in our fall cohort. Soon after that, we'll have a convocation where the community will come together both virtually and in person. So this is kind of the beginning. You know, we're still in the kind of traditional academic calendar where the autumn is the time for some real focused energy. That's quickly changing, however, as I'm sure many of you on this call are exploring the possibility of engaging Naropa virtually rather than on campus, and potentially engaging Naropa with start dates that are not the traditional fall start date. And it's exciting for us to be able to offer these options at this point. You know, we welcomed an international community in 1974 when we came together. 2,500 people showed up in Boulder. But the key there was if you were not living in Boulder and wanted to experience Naropa, you needed to find your way here. And that was exciting, and it was a robust and really exciting community that we developed. But it also meant that for a lot of people, the opportunity to join us was simply not there. There are economic reasons, there are all sorts of other life reasons that created the obstacles. And now for us to be able to work on a blend of residential learning, which is still a very important and powerful way of participating, to blend that with hybrid learning or virtual learning is something which the faculty and the staff have been working hard for quite a long time to be able to offer. There's no question that to 2020, when we all started first experiencing the drama of COVID, we had to convert really quickly into an online university, somewhat unwillingly and more quickly than we wanted to. But having done that, I think that the faculty particularly developed the kind of confidence that we could deliver a Naropa education which integrates, as you know, mindfulness and compassion practices, contemplative practices, with a more traditional Western academic offering, and could do it in a way where the feedback that we got from students that were participating from a distance was strong, and that while we are continuing to learn from those early experiments and to continue to improve the way that we're doing things, we feel really good about the fact that we have now a much more diverse community because of the variety of doorways that are open to students to participate. And beyond the degree student opportunities, we've got a kind of refreshed and renewed extended campus set of offerings for adult learning, continuing professional education. And for some of you, that may be an option even now for you. For others, it may be after you come through the Naropa journey, graduate and become Naropa alums, there may be opportunities to maintain your connection with the community. But in any case, the way that we can now bring almost a half a century of experience and of learning to the bigger world is something that we're really quite excited about. You're going to have an opportunity in a few minutes to hear from Michael Bauer, which is exciting from my point of view. Michael and I relate closely with each other. Michael is our sustainability director and director of the Joanna Macy Center at Naropa. Is incredibly influential in the areas of sustainability and environmental justice. And so the chance to hear from him, I think, will give you a really good initial taste of what the Naropa experience is like. And so I'm grateful for Michael taking time this summer to be joining you. And so I hope you'll have an opportunity to engage with him and see what kinds of questions come up for you. You know, for me, it's more a general welcome. We have an incredibly committed staff in the admissions office, financial aid, student success, our division of mission and culture and inclusive community, whose entire focus is on making sure that we are walking our talk regarding inclusion and diversity, all come together really to create opportunities, not just for the students who've already made the commitment, but also to relate with any of you who are still considering whether or not Naropa is the place that you want to invest your time and your resources for a period of time, whether that's graduate or undergraduate, a place where you can engage both academically and experientially and personally, whether you call it spiritually or whatever else you want to, however else you want to describe the sort of personal inner journey that we all take. We think at Naropa, the way in which the faculty have worked to integrate all of those pathways is something which sets us apart. We consider ourselves the birthplace of the modern mindfulness movement, but that's more than just a phrase, the marketing talk. it is the case that from the mid 70s on, all of the most significant teachers, creatives, writers, poets, scientists, religious studies practitioners and teachers and so on, that were starting to explore the 20th and now 21st century expression of what mindfulness looks like, not only as a religious practice, but also a secular one, but no less sacred. That happened at Naropa and continues to happen here. And we're very pleased that we have an almost half century now history of being able to do that work. So welcome to all of you that have joined us. I'm available through email if you have any specific questions. There are probably people that I work with every day that are going to be more suited to answer. But if you've got some general questions about Naropa, about our history, about our academic model and our vision, I'm also more than happy to hear from you and would welcome any communication. So I'll turn it back to Peter, welcome you again, and I hope you have a good couple of hours.
And thank you very much for joining us, President Leaf. And as the president mentioned, in those early 1970s, our founder, Chogyam Trungpa Rinpoche, began giving seminars and lectures in Colorado. 1974 is when Naropa's story truly began in some ways, and by the mid-1980s, Naropa became a fully accredited institution of higher learning, and we've been on the forefront of contemplative education ever since. Just one of those professors making that possible is Michael Bauer, who we have the honor of learning from today. Just a little bit of background on why President Leaf and myself are pretty excited for the sample class today. Professor Bauer arrived as Naropa's first Director of Sustainability in 2018. Now, thanks to the efforts of motivated students and their faculty supporters. He now works alongside students, faculty, and staff to honor Naropa's commitment to our mission of climate neutrality and ecological justice. Since joining the Naropa community, he's added the role of director of the Joanna Macy Center for Resilience and Regeneration. Michael Bauer also teaches a sustainability seminar named Regenerative Community in Action. Professor Bauer has presented original research at the Humanitarian Technology Conference of MIT, published in Procedia Engineering, Coastal Transitions, and the Athens Journal of Education. Professor Bauer is passionate about developing novel solutions in climate mitigation, humanitarian engineering, and regenerative agriculture for solving entrenched challenges of poverty and community resilience. Now, after today's sample class, we will have a small period of time at the end of class today for some questions. If you'd like to add a question, you'll find the Q&A option in your Zoom chat. Please send any inquiry to that section and we will do our best to connect you with an answer. I mentioned that sample class. Now on to that main course of today. Our sample class will be The Humans Are Dead. Long live the humans. We'll explore the stories we tell ourselves about ourselves from the lens of non-duality and how we can change our story to create a new narrative for a flourishing future. Thank you very much for joining us today, Professor Bauer.
Oh, Peter, thank you for that introduction. Thank you, Chuck, Evie, Taylor, and all the technical staff. Hi, everyone. It's great to be with you today. Thank you for joining us at Experience Naropa for this sample class. And the idea of a sample class is it's a sample class. So it gives you an idea of what a classroom experience at Naropa might look like. Now, if you're joining remotely versus in person or hybrid, of course, those will be a little different. So today, being that this is obviously a remote class, it'll be more of a taste in that direction, but trying to give you the opportunity to glimpse into how we do things differently here at Naropa, because you'll find the difference is substantial. I don't need to say any more about myself because of that wonderful warm introduction by Peter and Chuck, except to say that after almost 2 decades of environmental activism and thinking, if I just get a science degree, an engineering degree, and we get more science and education out there, we can solve these problems. And that led me to the discussion in this class today, the non-dual approach to sustainability being that, yes, that's important, and it's not enough. It's not going to get us there. My bias is that we could have a perfect zero-sum system of energy, waste, and water and fix our biodiversity crisis, our climate crisis, our social crises. But we're just going to be back here again and repeat the same mistakes in 500 years or 200 years or 1,000 years or whatever it will take, unless we address the fundamental confusion and pain that it is to be born human, more or less for different folks born in different bodies, of course, representing social locations. So that's the particular capacity of a Naropa education, is transforming consciousness. So speaking of which, excuse me, let's jump right into this. I'll share my screen here and I hope you can see this. I don't know if that's the right screen. I had that set up. Let me try that again. Let's see, screen 2. Okay, now can you tell me, are you seeing the slideshow? You're seeing the slides. Thank you, Peter. We're going to tell a story about the story of humans. But first, I would like you to get a piece of paper and something to write with. And maybe it's just writing on your computer, maybe it's writing on the back of your hand, but the question I want you to keep in mind is, describe or write a poem or a haiku or a sketch. What would happen if humans disappeared magically from the face of the earth? Snap your fingers, humans are gone. Whether it's, we're transported by an alien creature or there's a massive cataclysm that wipes us out. What would the world look like? Let's just take a minute to write a few things down, make a sketch or drawing, or describe linearly what that might look like for you. Don't think about it too much, just whatever comes to mind. Okay, let's take just another few moments, please. Now, I realize that you may not have finished your thoughts. Clearly, that's not enough time to describe what the earth would look like if all the humans disappeared. But keep that in mind. So as I mentioned, today we're going to talk about the story of what Dr. Joanna Macy calls the Industrial Growth Society, but you might know it by other names. And in the bones of that story is the concept of sustainability and the state of our biosphere, our life support system, our planet. So let's talk about sustainability. Probably not the picture you think of when you think of sustainability. This is our 40th president of the United States, Ronald Reagan, of course. And as a person born in this body, in the Midwest, in a conservative state, in the United States, in the 20th century, I grew up loving Ronald Reagan, or at least the story about the image of Ronald Reagan. As I grew older, I found out about punk music, like Patti Smith and Iggy and the Stooges. That was interesting. And I joined the military, I worked, I traveled, and I grew up. And as I did, I became disillusioned by the state of the world, the environment, the things that I was supposed to value as a modern person, quote unquote, and the things that I was supposed to ignore or neglect. Something didn't feel right. Maybe you felt that way as well. I felt like I was living in a double reality. Have you ever felt caught this way, dwelling on the seemingly insurmountable challenges facing humanity? Felt powerless, annoyed, maybe angry, perhaps frozen? So if you have ever felt that humans are a cancer, you're right. Here's a graph of the human population growth superimposed on a graph of the number of families of plants and animals that have gone extinct since 1800-ish. So if you've ever felt that we're a cancer, you're right. If you have ever felt that humans are the solution, you're right. Can both of these be true? Can both of them be false? Or are they both simultaneously true and false? Right about now, I think we would do introductions, but since we're on a Zoom webinar, I would like to just jump right into a practice. And this practice comes from Joanna Macy, a great friend of Naropa, a great mentor whose work changed my life and the lives of many at Naropa. She wrote this book, Act of Hope, which is one of the texts we use in my core sustainability seminar with Dr. Chris Johnstone. She's a scholar of Buddhism and general systems theory, as well as one of the co-creators of Deep Ecology, author of 13 books, and a respected voice in the movements for peace, justice, and the earth. And her wide-ranging work addresses psychological and spiritual issues, as well as the cultivation of ecological awareness. And so over 40 years, she's created a groundbreaking framework for personal and social change. One of those frameworks is in this book. It's also in a book she wrote with Molly Brown called Coming Back to Life. This powerful methodology for its application is called the work that reconnects. The work that reconnects is a spiral that has sort of 4 stations. And in those stations, this methodology helps us to metabolize stuck energy and liberate that energy to go forth with whatever that might be: trauma, pain, confusion, anger, rage, freezing. It begins with gratitude. So I'd like to start with a practice from this book. As you can see, gratitude is at the root of this spiral here of the dandelion, and then it grows into the second station, honoring our pain for the world. Then the flower of seeing with new eyes, and then this flowering going to seed of going forth to then seed into new roots for new spirals, new cycles. So what I'd like you to do is, if you have a tree, rather a window or a doorway, or anywhere where you can see something outside, even if it's just the grass, even if it's just dirt with a few blades of grass on it, preferably a tree or some green space. And if anything, you can look at this tree. We're going to do a brief practice thanking what supports you to live. And it comes from the book. So take a moment, get comfortable. And now gaze upon, in whatever way is comfortable for you, that greenery or that nature or that area, even if it's just a single blade of grass in between 2 parked cars, even if it's just dirt or soil. Take a moment to express thanks. With each breath that you take in, see if you can experience gratitude for the resources that simply would not be there were it not for those magnificent creatures that give us life in the soil and in the plant matter. Oxygen, food, the cooling of temperatures, the regulation of the water cycle, that are all necessary for human life. Thank you. Bear in mind also that plants absorbing carbon dioxide, basically turning light and air into life. It's almost magical. They help address climate disruption. And in fact, many times have saved our world from overheating dangerously through this buffering of a negative feedback loop here in our biosphere for the past 70 million years or longer. Thank you. Without plants and all they do for us, we wouldn't be alive today. So consider how you would like to express your thanks for a moment, one moment more. And I'll ring a bell to begin that moment. And when I ring the bell again, we'll come back. But in that interim, find a way to express thanks. If you notice your thoughts wandering, regard that with compassion return to the expression of gratitude. Continual recovery back to the expression of gratitude, or focusing on the breath. Label any thinking, return to gratitude. Maybe it's just a simple thank you. And coming back to the group. Thank you for investigating that gratitude practice with me. And I'd like to invite you now to just share any thoughts you might have had in the chat. What might have come up for you? Maybe it was you weren't able to tap into gratitude. Maybe it was this is dumb. Maybe this is amazing. Whatever it is that came up for you while you were sitting quietly with your breath and expressing gratitude for that which gives us life. Right into the chat is fine. Don't be shy. And while you're sitting with that prompt, we'll continue. I see something in. Oh, you're not able to put it into the chat. Okay, thank you. Thank you for that. We'll continue. If you'd like, you can write those down on your own, and you can email me with those thoughts, or anyone in this panel with those thoughts, and we'll be happy to connect with you on those. But for now, just notice those and honor those feelings. There's nothing wrong or right about it. Let's continue. So we did it. We saved the world. Or did we save the world with our little gratitude practice there? Maybe. Yes. No? Maybe. Maybe. We don't have to be heroes to make world-changing differences. And I mean that literally. That's not meant to be vague. You don't have to be like Deja Taylor. Deja is a 17-year-old high school student at Iowa City West High School who invented sutures that change color when an infection is present at a surgical site or a wound site. Because people in underdeveloped countries or in impoverished communities were dying from infection at rates far greater. Her invention will save countless lives in the developing world. You don't have to be like this Brazilian couple, Lelia de Luis Juanic Salgado and Sebastião Salgado, who, when Sebastião returned from covering the war in Rwanda, said the land was sick as I was. Everything was destroyed, their property in Brazil. And he said, then my wife had a fabulous idea to replant this forest. On the left side, you can see before in 2000 and after in 2013. It was just those two, their vision and some help. And he said, when we began to do that, then all the insects and birds and fish returned. And thanks to this increase of the trees, I too was reborn. This was the most important moment, unquote. You don't have to be like them. What if I told you that we just now, expressing gratitude for that blade of grass or tree outside your window, or even the tree in that slide, just now we changed the world a little bit. And I don't mean metaphorically. Quantum mechanics has shown us that our thoughts extend infinitely in all directions, and they can change the spin of electrons that are quantumly entangled at distances of light years. That's a physical reality, or at least a quantum reality. What if I told you that you were just as powerful as Miss Taylor or the Salgados, and just as powerless? We are simultaneously powerful and powerless. And what I mean by this is, what would happen if we all did this every day? So if you're on a 200-ton wooden schooner rowing with an oar, you're not going to do much. But if there's 5,000 of you rowing with an oar, you're still doing the same motion. You're just doing the same thing, but now you're all together, powerful and powerless, just like voting or a bucket brigade or an ocean cleanup. This is a both and phenomenon. Non-duality. Non-dualism. This is the Hindu symbol for Om, which represents unity and the non-dualism of the world. Non-dualism, here's a paper that master's student in ecopsychology, Dakota Limon, wrote for her master's thesis at Naropa in ecopsychology. She's now finishing her doctorate degree at the California Institute of Integral Studies, CIIS. And in her paper, she wrote about this concept of non-duality, of things having a nature and no nature. So what I said previously about people being an ecological disaster agent and part of the solution is not a new story, but it's a relatively new once again in the West. So she said in her paper, quote, an identity that doesn't hold as much value in the current ego-oriented sociocultural stage is the identity of ecological belonging. Ecological identity is unique among the other identities, as it is not a projection to strengthen humanity's separate individual egos, but rather is a deep fundamental truth about their relationship to the natural world that strengthens their likeness and connectedness as a species. The human reality as an ecologically participatory species has been known, revered, ritualized, and practiced by many cultures and societies throughout history, unquote. So, but this currently goes against the current story or narrative in the West here, or at least in the United States and in North America and the United States. What is that narrative? What's that story? We'll come back to that. Keep that in mind. But whatever that story is that we'll investigate in a few moments, We need a new cultural narrative because it's not working. Or perhaps it is working. And now we're getting feedback about the cost of that benefit. So that new narrative that we need is a powerful leverage point for change. What is a leverage point? This is Dr. Dana Meadows, who was a colleague of Joanna Macy and cites Joanna's doctoral thesis in her book, Thinking in Systems, which I use for my engineering students at Metro State University prior to arriving at Naropa, and I use it at Naropa as well. She wrote a book in 1972, the now famous Limits to Growth book. It was the first time that scientists at MIT had used computer modeling to simulate if we continue this industrial growth, which has unquestionably brought incredible benefit, lifted millions of people out of poverty, solved diseases, created uncalculable wealth in terms of historic human civilization. But at what cost? What happens if we continue on this trajectory? And they found that we would overshoot the carrying capacity of the system, what the earth can provide for us. Sort of like if you've got a great savings account, you can live off of the interest. But if you start spending down the principal, pretty soon there's no interest left and you go to zero. In her book, she wrote about leverage points, places to powerfully intervene in a system. What happens when we find these leverage points? What are they? A leverage point, if you find it, when you intervene at that point, it has an outsized effect, as opposed to trying to intervene somewhere else that may be easier to find. You spend all of your energy intervening for little effect. And these are concepts that we've known a long time. We always want to find it. The secret potion, get the drop on it, skeleton key, magic bullet. What happens when we find those, however, is too often we push those in the wrong direction. So we find this magic potion and then we do the wrong thing with it. The classic example is traffic. We added 30,511 new miles of freeway between 1993 and 2017. That's a lot. That's 1.5 times the circumference of the earth. An increase of 42%. Meanwhile, population growth in those areas rose 32%. So great, we're going to alleviate traffic by building new roads. Except traffic delays are now up in those areas by 144%. Doesn't make sense. But maybe it does. The issue is that humans have trouble with complexity. We like things to be one thing, at least here in the West. That's why when we talk about, my cultural momentum, when I started learning about the nature of things is no nature, and the way that Buddhists teach being this sort of vague yes and, it was frustrating for me because it went against my grain. An even older, less known example of a leverage point is that of the agricultural revolution, roughly 12 to 15,000 years ago. In this, the Fertile Crescent, which was then Mesopotamia, was now Syria, Iraq, Iran. When humans learned that we could till the land, we had already been doing horticulture for several thousand years at this point. But we figured out if we till the land and irrigate, we can get huge gains in productivity and grow more food and feed more people and create different forms of wealth. But what we know now, what we've learned is the feedback we've gotten from the system, because systems have feedback, but there's always a delay in the feedback mechanism. You can't get information until after the fact. And that delay is shorter or longer depending on the system. 15,000 years later, we're learning that you can only do that once. After those 10 to 15 millennia of tilling, we're losing the race against bare ground, which is the cancer of desertification. And desertification is just a fancy word for ground turning to desert. 2/3 of the Earth's terrestrial surface, arable land, not just the terrestrial surface, but the arable land, that is, that we could cultivate, is now desert or desertifying. United States, North America, South America, and Asia, not to mention Africa. Perhaps that leverage point we pushed in the wrong direction. And maybe economic growth, this industrial growth society that's like, wow, look at this incredible middle class and wealth and millions of people in China being lifted out of poverty and all over the world. Perhaps we're pushing that in the wrong direction. So what I'd like to ask you now is to go to this link Let's see if I can share this with you. I'll have to share you a new screen. The new screen is, there it is. That doesn't seem to be, there we go. Are we seeing this? Go to sift.ly and enter the code M4CK. You can do that on your phone or on your browser. Just type in the browser sift.ly and it'll ask you to enter a code. That's M4CK. And what I want you to do is when you hear the word sustainability, what comes to mind? Now, don't think about it. Just to illustrate our cultural momentum and your family of origin and your history, what comes to mind when you hear the word sustainability? Don't think about it too much. Just write it in there as soon as you hear that. Sustainability, what's the first thing that pops into mind? Let's see here. Are folks able to log into that? Oh no, the link isn't working? Shoot, okay. Interesting. Evie and Taylor are telling me the link's not working and you're getting redirected. Huh, I apologize for that. This is something I've used for a number of years and I'm not sure what's happening. Okay, someone's able to log in. I see someone put in cyclical. I'm gonna try it from my browser too. Huh, it's getting directed to dan.com. That's new. Okay, thank you, Taylor. Interesting. I appreciate you finding that. M4CK. So Taylor just posted the correct link in the chat. And you can enter those. Okay, let's try this. Back to that. Apologies for the interruption there. Why is it? Okay. Evolving, everlasting, cyclical. Yeah. Evolving is good, everlasting, cyclical. Excellent. Stabilizing, future oriented. I see 5 folks able to log in. There we go. Balance. Stabilizing, balance, evolving. Good, thank you. Equitable. Thank you. So if you're able to continue into that link, we'll come back to this word cloud in a moment. There we go. Future. Yes. Peace. Yes. Here's our current, this is of course is a self-selected sample, right? We've got folks that have found Naropa, chosen to come to this sample class. So this is a biased sample and that's fine. That's good, what we're looking for. Future, balance, long lasting. Yeah. This is our approach to the solution of being unsustainable, to think about the future, to live in balance, to focus on cycles and long-lasting, ongoing, equitable peace, to evolve, to think in systems. I saw systems come in there. Absolutely. Okay, good. Now, the next one, it should come up in the same link. You might just have to refresh your link. If you refresh that same link, the question now is, what is our most challenging, pressing challenges as a species? Same code, M4CK. What are our most pressing challenges as a species? We've identified what we need to focus on. So that's the sort of dream. The two motivating factors in behavioral psychology are avoiding the nightmare and pursuing the dream. So what's the nightmare to avoid? War, coming together. Thank you. I'm going to change back to a word cloud. Here we go. There we go. Listening. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. A lot more diversity in, seemed like we were a bit more on the same page with sustainability. Now we're noticing there's no dearth of challenges, perspectives, consciousness, independence, ungratefulness, coming together, community, selfishness, isolation. That's a big one post-COVID. And if y'all aren't seeing this word cloud, just let me know. I thought I shared it. Hope I'm not the only one seeing it. Okay, great. Thank you. Thank you. I'd be so lost without Evie, Taylor, and Peter here, keeping me in my integrity. Selfishness is the big one in the middle. Yeah. Wonder where that comes from. Forgiveness, right next to selfishness. Poverty, lacking, capital, love, war, learning. I really like the way y'all think here. Hunger, absolutely. So we can see that we've got this set of, let's call them strategies or at least plans to sustain, or at least a vision, and also an array of challenges to overcome. And what I'm noticing here is a lot of these have to do with consciousness. And I'm not surprised given this population here for Experience Naropa. Thank you for participating in that. I'll make these available to you as well, and you can have my email at the end. If you'd like to have this word cloud, I'll send it to you. Feel free to take a screen capture before we move on as well if you'd like. But we can see how we're all thinking about the greatest challenges we face as a species. And so that challenge, those arrays of challenges in the plan to sustain, we have an approach here at Naropa that's for sustainability that I want to share with you and that we teach in our classes. Our division, mission, culture, and inclusive community, we're trying to create a unified model in higher education that I haven't found anywhere else of sustainability, social justice, and contemplative practice unified, because we believe all three are necessary to reach a higher level of consciousness and to transcend the challenges that we've created for ourselves. Let's take a look at this. Our ecology, our ecosystem, our biosphere I don't think it needs to be stated, is what gives us all life. Without it, of course, we wouldn't be here. We would never have evolved. So this is how we do sustainability at Naropa. The ecology contains everything. And within that, we've created this economy, our political economy, that's based on our natural resources, basically. And so that economy I used to put economy inside society, but now our economy is increasingly trans-societal or transcultural in our globalized political economy. So that society is nested inside the economy, and inside that society is our personal well-being. These are the 4 levels of sustainability that we have to sustain to truly create a sustainable, regenerative, resilient culture and civilization. But we center the personal sustainability piece here at Naropa because we believe, as I said earlier, if we don't address that fundamental confusion, selfishness, greed, lack that y'all mentioned just a moment ago, and those challenges, forgiveness, if we don't address that, we're going to continue to recreate these problems, even if we get the technology correct. That's the way we approach sustainability here at Naropa, and that's the leverage point at which we try to engage healing and sustainability. And I think Naropa is powerfully positioned to secure your education in such a way that you bring this into your vocation without having to be a crunchy granola like me. You've embodied that into your psyche. And that's what we try to do here, is integrate. And so now that I've showed you sort of our model of sustainability, I've spoken a little bit, I've asked a few questions. I'd like you to return to that piece of paper that you wrote on from the beginning. What would it look like if humans disappeared magically, right? What would that look like? And in fact, someone did that thought experiment. Alan Weissman, in his, I think it's a 2012 or 2013 book, maybe 2015, The World Without Us. Beautiful thought experiment. And he actually goes through and describes what would happen to the buildings, what would happen to the subway tunnels in Manhattan, what would happen to the nuclear silos and the power plants. That's fascinating. And, the idea that I held for so long was that, if we just got rid of humans, the earth would be this flourishing garden again. And I'm curious if you thought that as well, or if you think that as well. And I, to a degree, I think that as well too. You could put that in the Q&A if you'd like. Is that true? Is that good? Well, the thing is, we've created these problems, and we've also created the worldview from which these problems have emerged. That's our story. The old story is that the earth was made for humans and we were made to control the earth. That's the old story in the West, I should say. Clearly, there's many Eastern and indigenous cultures that have never subscribed to this worldview until the advent of industrial growth capitalism, which again, we acknowledge has brought forth so many benefits to society. And now we're seeing the costs in terms of corruption, oppression, systemic isms of all kinds, racism, sexism, right? Not to mention climate change, biodiversity loss. This is the sort of cartoonish model of what that worldview looks like. Our old story is that of separation and individuation. And if we're talking about unity and oneness and non-dualism, maybe that's true. The individuation is true, and we're also integrated at the same time. This old story is now overclocked, it's overemphasized, one that we probably needed for survival at some point, but is no longer serving us. Modernism, here's a statement. Modernism has brought about an increased quality of life, lifted millions out of poverty and misery, and created the most safe and comfortable society the West has ever produced. And modernism, quote unquote, has destroyed 50% of large mammals, created deserts across half of the arable land, and is rapidly heating the atmosphere in a runaway feedback loop. Both of those are true. And that's the story of humans in the West so far. So prior to the Industrial Revolution, life in the West included a lot of misery for most. Just checking out the Q&A here. And so the industrial growth clearly was beneficial for folks in 17th century England prior to the Industrial Revolution. It was just absolute misery for centuries for people in Western Europe, most people. Okay, but then after Industrial Revolution, right, we created all these problems for ourselves, but now we've started to solve a lot of those problems. Polio cases are nearly eliminated as of 2016. The number of girls and women using contraceptives in the 69 poorest countries has grown 120 million from 2012 to 2020 to 2016. Over the past 25 years, 137,000 people were lifted from extreme poverty, beating the UN's goal of having poverty by 5 years. This is really wonderful news. But the question is like, well, why did we have to solve those problems in the first place? It's both and. We've created the problem and we can create the solution. On the other hand, when colonists arrived in North America, there's a wonderful story. There's a great article in Medium called "Illiterate Savage Crushes Noble in Debate," which I love. This man, a 35-ish-year-old man named Kondiaronk or Adario, his nickname in French was the Rat. He was going around the northern part of what's now the United States and Canada in the Huron region. He's Huron, debating. He was being asked to debate these Western European nobles of French, Dutch, and English lineage, and just absolutely shredding their logic. So, what he would say is like, okay, you have all these things, but we have so much more freedom because we have leisure time. They've avoided the so-called improvements like farming and the wheel, which simply just meant more work for everyone. They did have wheels, but they just used them for toys. He's quoted as saying, quote, "The what's yours is yours and what's mine is mine drives you. And it's easy to show an example from all the savages of Canada," quote unquote savages, his word, "because despite their apparent poverty, they are much richer than you, where the yours mine principle drives all kinds of crime." And he said, "Europeans only do good when forced to and avoid doing evil only by the fear of punishment. This is not a basis for civilization to him." And there's numerous recorded cases of whites being kidnapped and raised in the tribe, only to escape later and return to civilization. But so many stories, and you can find this, Sebastian Junger wrote about it in his book, Tribe, which had to do with more than just indigenous tribes. Many made their way back to the tribe rather than to live out their lives in the stress and injustices of European society. There's many cases, and there are no recorded cases of a European-raised, educated, native North American going back to European society. What does that tell us? So capitalism has brought us an increased quality of life, lifted millions out of poverty and misery? Right, yes, and at what cost? Okay, so if humans disappeared magically, what would happen? Would the earth be better off or worse off? And we're wrapping up here, and I haven't seen anything in the Q&A, but I would encourage you to put anything in there. I think my bias is that, in the short term, it would look really glorious, probably, as far as natural systems go. But the thing is, we don't understand the complexity of natural systems at all. We think we do. We don't know the long-term effects of what that would look like, because aren't we eliminating other species ourselves? We're causing all these plants and animals to go extinct. How's that turning out? We're from this planet. We belong here. So our dualistic worldview has hijacked our survival instincts to overvalue one or two elements, throwing the system into unsustainable. I want to leave you with The Great Turning, this quote by Joanna Macy. This term, the Great Turning, this is the new story. This is the new narrative of unity and integration. This was first coined in a book by Craig Schindler and Gary Lappett in 1985, and then popularized and amplified by Joanna Macy. She said, when you act on behalf of something greater than yourself, you begin to feel it acting through you with a power greater than your own. This is grace, unquote. The great turning is the turning away from the industrial growth society into a life-sustaining civilization. Receiving the feedback, yes. We see both and the benefits and the destruction. That we are an ecological disaster agent and a beneficial keystone species. That's our role on the planet as gardeners, beneficial and a keystone species. So there's 3 dimensions of the great turning that you can hear Joanna talk about in our podcast, Mindful You. You can find Mindful You podcast on Stitcher and Apple Podcasts and anywhere you get your podcasts. She was interviewed by David Devine in 2018 or 19, talking about the great turning and talking about her work. And in that interview, she describes these 3 dimensions of the great turning. And the 3 dimensions of the great turning have to do with, let's see if I can get this to work, creating this life-sustaining civilization. Not sure if this will work. Thank you, Taylor. There we go. Maybe not. Please let me know if you cannot hear this short video.
How do we be fully present to our world at a time when the suffering and the prospect?
Oh no. Okay, thank you, Brianna.
How do we be fully present to our world at a time when the suffering and the prospects for conscious life forms are so grim? The living systems of Earth are coming apart under the onslaught of the industrial growth society scrambling for the last dollars. There never has been guarantee for human life. All the wise ones tell us that. But it's that knife edge of uncertainty where we come alive to our truest power. This is the biggest bite out of the tree of knowledge in 5,000 years. It's a recognition that our planet is a living system and we belong to it, like cells in a living body. You can't pick up any piece of this world, a stone, a twig, without finding it hitched to everything else in creation. Now is emerging a fundamental change, like green shoots coming through the rubble of a dysfunctional civilization. The greatest, largest social movement in human history. As people acting in defense of life wake up to the grandeur of who they really are, look into the eyes of any being, you can see, we're in this great mystery.
We're in this great mystery. And this great mystery is enacted by the great turning. There's 3 co-equal dimensions of the great turning: holding actions, stopping the destruction, increasing education, changing the way we do things, structural change, creating life-sustaining systems and practices like renewable energy, sustainable regenerative agriculture, new education systems, and shifts in consciousness. The creation of a new story, a new narrative, new belief system, new worldviews. And that's the particular power of Naropa education that I don't believe we're getting in many places in the world, certainly not in the United States. That shifts in consciousness is a powerful role here that we focus on. Because as I mentioned, those leverage points, we use this iceberg model of systems thinking in our classes, particularly the sustainability classes, to indicate how a system looks to an individual. And I'll wrap up with this. The farther down the iceberg you go, the greater your leverage point. And the shifts in consciousness is down here right at the bottom. This is how we change. So all my efforts in the material levels up here, while having some effect, have not been nearly as powerful as the mental model's effect. And that's the new story. From command and control to sense and respond. From sustainable to regenerative. From humans are a cancer to humans are a beneficial keystone species. We can solve these problems because we created them. And the spiral of the work that reconnects is a tool that we use to do that, to liberate stuck energy, to heal, and to create a flourishing future for everyone. So shifting our worldview from egocentric to ecocentric is what we're at here and the work we're up to. And I hope you join us in this work. Thank you for listening. I really appreciate your time and attention today. Here's my contact information. You can also get that from any of the presenters. And I just want to say thank you. Have a great day. I really appreciated your energy and your time today. And I'm happy to hear any questions if we have time, or if we need to move on, just email me or call me. So thank you.
Well, and thank you right back, Professor. Many thought-provoking pieces ranging from reconciliation, dualism, going against that Western narrative. Many thought-provoking pieces today.